Yep. Well, and we'll make a separate motion of the council to.
We'll get started whenever you guys are ready.
Make a recommendation to the city council for approval.
At least to have,
We'll
I like to
a
have that
motion,
list.
yes or no, and
Shows
then the
what
city
the
council
premium is, so I know how much I'm spending myself.
to approve or deny. And then if they deny, we get in the fifth item.
Could you explain this desk?
I will, at the next bill, yeah.
Whenever you're ready, Mayor.
Okay. Call the Broken Arrow Special Council meeting to order. City Council, call to order. Oh, that's what I just did. Roll call, City Council.
Excuse me. Pickle. Here. Green. Here. Ford.
Here?
Here,
Parks. Wimpy.
Here.
he was just barely here.
I was here.
But he was here.
was
He
in
was
the
in the
room.
room. We'll call it good.
Roll call for Planning Commission.
We'll have the planning commission roll call.
Goranson.
Yes.
Cone.
Here.
Klempa.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Payne.
Here. Item 5 is general council business. Item 5A, consideration, discussion, and possible action of the Housing and Demographic Study final report from Points Consulting LLC and approval of and authorization to execute Resolution 1635. Rocky.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, Chair, Vice Chair, Commission members, Rocky Community Development Director.
Take a breath.
Here with the City of Broken Arrow. Tonight, we're going to present to you the findings of the Housing and Demographic Study. If you remember, as part of the 2019 Comprehensive Plan, one of the strategic goals was to assess our current housing needs and our future housing needs. So in May of 2023, Points Consulting was awarded a contract to figure out what those current and future housing needs are. As part of that that report, we also formed an advisory committee made up of several community members to provide input to that. So tonight, Farhad's going to give you the summary of what those findings were for the Housing and Demographic Study. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. And staff would recommend after those discussions that you would approve and adopt the Housing and Demographic Study. So without further ado, here's Farhad.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, Planning Commission Chair, Vice Chair, Planning Commission members, City Manager Spurgeon.
You're eating your time up there, Farhad.
Yeah, you only have 3 minutes, sir.
I've used up 3
You're
minutes
down to
of
a
my-
minute.
So this housing study is part of our comprehensive plan. When the City Council adopted the 2019 next comprehensive plan, there were several policies and tasks that were identified in the in the comprehensive plan. The principal thing was to change our zoning code and our subdivision code, but to do that, we had to do several other tasks, which is this housing study is one of them. So we hired a consulting firm a little over a year ago that met with the 15-person steering committee that the council elected, and there were members of the Planning Commission and council on that steering committee that met for several times. The study, I will not go into details of it. It's fairly extensive. It's a 160-page color report with a lot of charts and graphs and so forth, and we will get you an electronic copy and a paper copy as you need it at the end of the meeting. So the study includes the study of the entire 101 square mile city fence line. The annexed area is about 66 square miles. Our estimated population is 120,000 people. And I might remind that when we started this study, some of the data that was available from Census, ESRI, and other ACS type reports was 2020, 2021, and 22. And since then, a lot of things have changed. So as we discuss this, I'm sure you all will have some questions on this study that we can go into later, because the okay, so here's I'll go through some of these slides that are in this report, and we can come back to that as you see how the projection from 2015 to 20 is the actual figure, and then showing Tulsa and Rydnick growth going forward. The city's growth over the last 120 years is this particular chart that shows how the city grew from, and in particular in the 1970s and 80s is when the main growth started. Some of the surprising things that the consultants have brought to the council, planning commission, and our steering committee last year were a few major things that the economists have spotted. One thing is that Broken Arrow's median age has grown quite a bit in the last 3-4 decades. So our population is aging, and this slide shows that we are over the median age in Tulsa County. And of course, Wagner County is slightly older, and then the rest of the state. And I can come back to some of these. The housing unit growth proposal in the study, there are 3 scenarios that they showed. Currently, when the study was completed in 23-24 timeframe, we have 46,750 housing units. If we continue to grow under the old code and the status quo scenario over the next approximate 15 to 20 years, we'll have 64,910. If we do the moderate density, which the new zoning code is going to be promoting a little bit, you'll go by a little bit more. And then if you do more infill in our city, which has the capacity for, we'll be going up to over 71,000 housing units in the next 20 years. What that relates to is 40,000 more people in the next 20 years or so. The figures that they have arrived at are all established figures from the U.S. Census Bureau, ACS, and so forth. This particular chart, which is in your book on page 72, shows the Broken Arrow, how many houses we have per 1,000 residents compared to Tulsa County, Wagner County, Oklahoma, and the rest of the country. This slide shows that we are a typical suburban community, but the figures are changing where the blue line is Broken Arrow that is growing. So in the next 20 years, that line is going to be higher. So that shows our, and to me, in this particular chart, it's interesting is that it shows the good things about the city of Broken Arrow. So when we say quality of life, a place to stay and live, this particular chart is something that a lot of demographers look at. The median value of household income ratio is 2.9 in Broken Arrow. What this means is that our household are spending this percentage of their median income towards housing, and we are better than all other metrics in this region. And the numbers may be small, but every 0.1 or 0.5 is a substantial difference in economic terms of how good housing is. And so the consultants have written in the report that Broken Arrow is relatively very affordable. And since that is the case, outside development will come in and will promote the price of cost of housing going up in the future, because we are nationally fairly affordable. The median household income, which we all have seen in the past, that we are the highest in our region, and the county, both counties, and in Oklahoma. The cost burden of housing, and that is, I'm going forward in several chapters into our zoning study now, that the number of households that are severely cost burdened or cost burdened is 40%, whilst not 60% of our population is not cost burdened. And what cost burden means is that a certain percentage of your income over 3.2 or 3.3 going towards housing puts you in a cost burden category. The housing needs forecast. So what the forecast is that if we do these certain status quo scenario, we are showing 49,000 units in the 2040 time frame. Again, this is in a chart form that shows that the three different scenarios, the infill scenario, moderate, and status quo, how the Broken Arrow city growth will happen. These charts seem very simple and very gradual, but to outsiders, particularly to our consultants, this was very impressive. They looked at it and said, you have a lot of growth coming in the future, therefore you need to get ready. And that's where we come back to the comprehensive plan and the suggestions of this study and the zoning code that's coming right behind this. The household net worth of our community is fairly well. What was surprising to some of us was that the Wagner County side of our population is slightly higher in the net worth of the household as compared to the Tulsa County side. That also has a lot of meaning in it. Density has something to do with it. Housing in Wagner County is at a very low density compared to Tulsa County. So that relates to higher land cost and land value in the household wealth. The percentage of poverty, and Broken Arrow is the bottom line, so it's comparing to Tulsa County, Wagner County, and so forth, Broken Arrow is doing fairly well. Some of these charts have a lot of good to talk about, that our poverty levels in Broken Arrow, we are fortunate, is at a very low level compared to national, state, and regional standards.
Farhad, when you said household, are you talking, when on the slide previous to this, you said household, you're not talking about the stuff that's in the house and the house and the property. No, the slide previous to this one. You're talking about that, well, you just passed it again.
This one?
Nope, the next,
Next
that one.
You're talking about the house value and the property itself,
Yes.
not the household, everything that's included in the household.
There is a
right?
formula that ESRI, this source is from ESRI. ESRI is a private company that puts out data that is really looked at by all business and industrial development location specialists. So when you look at the wealth of net worth, and this is, I believe this is a median.
Yeah, and I just, when I see the word household, I think of stuff that's inside the house
Yes.
itself is all I'm thinking of. But it's not, from what you're saying.
Again, keep in mind, and the definition of household has also changed over the last many years. At one point, when we did our previous comprehensive plans, we had between 3 and 3.2 persons per house. That number has dropped to 2.67. And it's approaching even less than 2.6 in the next decade. So we have
We need
bigger
young ones like
houses.
Townsend over here to continue creating children.
Well,
No pressure.
the children are growing, but the houses are growing more than children, which we will come to pertaining to school enrollment and so forth. So back to the poverty level, we are doing fairly well. This is the rental price range of all unit sizes in Broken Arrow, how our rents have grown. And that is a stress factor, again, in the study that shows up. If you can see how from 2010, how our rent structure has grown. Rents in Broken Arrow for our region are fairly high, but again, nationally, it is very low. One thing in the study, as you all know, we started with looking at 10 surrounding communities to compare as peer cities. Upon our request, the consultants increased that list to 36. 6 of those were not really completely related to Broken Arrow, but 25 to 28 of them had similar population, similar home wealth, and how we stacked against, and I'll come to that slide in a little bit here. This slide compares up to Olathe, which is 142,000. They have a lot of similar housing and demographic characteristics as City of Broken Arrow does. We have regional studies also done showing more of these, but Norman and Broken Arrow were in this particular round of peer cities that we studied. So Broken Arrow's single-family housing is 81.8, almost 82%. And we can see how we are about the highest in all of our peer cities, except for a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. Regional cost of housing comparison to these other cities, we are 3.2 in the ratio, income ratio. That is extremely affordable compared to other cities our size. So we hope that this type of demographic or information is looked at by industry and other locational specialists, and they do look at it. Our housing costs are more affordable, much cheaper than some of our peer cities elsewhere. And then this is the housing needs forecast that we can go into the three different categories of suggestions. Here are the total list of 30, I believe it's 30, this list is 30 cities, but we've studied about 35, 36 cities across the region in several states that compares Broken Arrow to the different studies. So back to the original study, there are recommendations in the study about the infill, the moderate growth, and the status quo. The city, through the approval of this document and the upcoming zoning study, will get us to the path of approving the new zoning code and then subsequently the subdivision regulations.
Okay.
I'll be glad to answer questions.
Any discussion by the council or commission?
Yes.
Excuse me. I'm going to borrow Commissioner Payne's microphone. I did have a definition question, kind of like Commissioner Gorson. When you talked about cost burden and the costs associated with it, were you talking simply rent and mortgages, or did that also include like utilities or fixer-upper type of anything associated with the house? If you remember that slide, it's about 5 slides back.
Yeah, that's a pertinent, good point. HUD has identified those, there are several categories, particularly main 4 categories. For those people who are paying more than 50% of their income into housing cost on a monthly or annual basis are severely cost burdened. Those that are paying between 35 to 50% in that approximate range are cost burdened. And then there are subcategories. Those families that are paying less than 28 and particularly less than 25% are not cost burdened. So in Broken Arrow, that chart showed that 60% of our population is not cost burdened. There are 2 separate categories, and I did not mention that the survey that we did, and I'll come back to that, shows that homeowners are not as cost burdened as home renters are. The renting population is more cost burdened in Broken Arrow than homeowners are. We have 82% of our housing stock is single family. Of those, approximately between 69 and 71% or 70% are occupied by 2 people. So that is one reason we are less cost burden on a single family side, but therefore our cost of housing is on the increase dramatically. I'll come back to that. Economically, there are this one just shows the 82%, and this is the rental figure. There is a chart similar that shows, or data that shows the cost ownership. So the rental price range has reached between the lower end being just below $1,500 and up to $1,500 a month on rental.
And that's something that a lot of times people talk about multifamily or rental homes and how they're instantly going to be low income or, crime-ridden and all of that. And I'm like, have you tried to rent a one-bedroom apartment lately? It's more than some mortgages, so it's not cheap to rent an apartment these days, or even rental homes that, really.
Wrapping up the study, there's a lot of good information or how good Broken Arrow is. As much as I've been following this for a number of years, I was surprised to see how good our city is compared to many other cities. However, there's all kinds of data in there that price pressure points are increasing dramatically here. So in the report, you will also see that home ownership in Broken Arrow is 72.6% of our households own their homes, which is a good figure compared to most of the other cities. We have 80.1 or 80.5% are single family, 2.2% are duplex homes, which are mostly rental. Multifamily is 11.8. That was a question that came up last year in one of our committee hearings, is how many multifamily units we have. So of all our 47,000, we have 11.8% is multifamily. 2.5 or 2.7 is mobile homes or portable structures, and condominiums are 2.8, just under 3% are condominium units. For cities compared to other cities, our condominium numbers are slightly lower than peer cities. The median cost of housing, we've talked a lot about it, in the year 23 is $265,000. And that has gone up in the last 2 years quite a bit.
Yep.
And that itself is putting pressures on, but at the same time, our income levels are pretty high. Now, what I went through earlier on the population charts and the data, I'll also highlight that Broken Arrow has 3 school systems, the largest being the Broken Arrow Schools, which is 117 square miles in the school boundary. And 75% to 80% are in the city, but the rest, 25% are not in our city limits at this time. Union schools comparatively have 28 square miles between Broken Arrow and Tulsa, and less than 7 square miles are in 6.5 to 7 square miles are in Broken Arrow city limits. The rest are in Tulsa, in Union. Union's enrollment is a little over 9,000. Broken Arrow's enrollment is over 20,000. Bixby is the 3rd school district where we have approximately 2.5 to 3 square miles in the very southwest side of our city. And they only have one school with approximately 2.5 or 3 mile service area that has very little density at this time. So again, conclusion of this numbers is that if we keep at this level, we're going to have 40,000 new folks in our city in the next 2 censuses.
I've got a quick question for you, Farhad. Going back to the slide that it talked about the poverty level, is that just parallel with what we're seeing from a growth perspective? So there's really not necessarily a increase in poverty level, but it's just that it's following our population growth?
Yes, it is. Though the very bottom line is Broken Arrow. The colors are a little skewed over here. So what you're looking at is the 8% of our population, and it's just gone a little over 8%, but you see the blue, Wagner County is coming down, and our trend is, we're still the lowest, but our numbers are in poverty are slowly growing.
Is that just due to expected population growth?
Yes.
Okay.
I would think so.
Okay.
There might be other economic data, things that we can extrapolate from it, but generally, the city growing this fast.
Okay.
I had a question for you.
Yes, sir.
If you don't mind going back to the slide that showed the list of the cities that were comparable in size. So with this, I'm curious, was there any studies or comparisons done to the growth rate of those other cities that are at a comparable size? I'm just curious as to how many of those have already plateaued, or are those cities also growing at a similar rate to Broken Arrow? Just to get an idea of the comparison for the single-family homes and owner-occupied.
Most of these cities are fairly large growth communities. Our growth is higher than all but 2 of them.
Okay.
So we have additional data in the book that shows that. But of the 30-some cities, we had the second or the third highest percentage of growth. Though I will say this, that data is from 2010 to 2022 or so. The growth of Broken Arrow between 20 and 23 was the highest. We grew at a faster percentage when all the other cities did not grow by that percentage. But that figure is kind of skewed because those were the pandemic years, or the start of the pandemic.
Yeah, and people were moving to our city.
And some of the growth rate has come back up again.
Well, and it'd be interesting, too, to see the sizes of these cities that are compared to us, because we're barely 50% grown out, right?
Yes.
So we still have plenty of growth to go, and it's be interesting to know if they're already topped out, right? Or what their percentage of growth would be. So, interesting.
Yes, there is data in here that shows how many thousand acres are in single-family and residential development and the other areas.
Thank you, sir. He pulled out that second thing, the pointer, and I thought he was going to like Men in Black us at one point. I'm not sure what that was, so.
So one thing I want to mention is that before we brought, along with the next item tonight, before we brought these 2 items before you, we wanted to make sure we did our due diligence and that we weren't overbearing the school system in some form or fashion. So sometime last year in August or so, we formed a little task advisory committee with the school district. We had members represented from the Planning Commission, Council, Wagner County, and we met with them to hear any concerns, to see if there was anything that we needed to adjust in our recommendations for the housing and demographic study, and then also for the zoning ordinance updates, which we'll present at a later time. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention that we're trying to be a good community partner and look at all the concerns that our school system could face if there was negative impacts from this housing and demographic study.
So let me ask you a question, Rocky. Because a lot of that stuff was over my head, even though I was on that committee and stuff, but listen to the points, talk about it. What kind of, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but what kind of tools are you going to get out of this study for what I see in the way of the planning department, planning commission and stuff like that, and the housing growth, the types of houses that are needed, the apartments, things like that? What kind of things are you going to get from it to
Well,
help
it sounds
us?
like you just put me on the spot, so I appreciate that.
No,
So
he didn't
If
want to
you-
put you on the
if you-
spot.
All you have to do is say, I'll get back to you later if you can.
So what,
Just don't call me up late tonight. Say, hey, I got your
I'll
answer.
speak to what I know, and if Farhad can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that we'll do, it also recommends the type of housing for this community. So there may be needs in duplexes or row homes, similar, different styles
Right.
of homes based on income levels for our citizens as well, which is one of the things that we would bring forward to you. Developers may have an interest, seeing the need based on this housing and demographic study. They may see a need to construct row homes in infill areas or something like that.
Well, see, that's what I thought, because like City of Tulsa and Broken Arrow, they always show, we show a need for more housing.
Correct.
Mainly attainable housing or affordable housing and stuff. And I know it's big with the city right now with the mayor there and stuff too. I just wondered what kind of things that we're getting out of this that really we need, that's going to help us.
Yep.
If that makes sense. But that's what y'all get paid for, so.
So I also have a question for you. Is there somewhere in this study that talks about our age demographic, as far as who's in our community, what age demographic is missing, et cetera?
It does, and I think Farhad alluded to it, but he can allude to it more, that our community is aging. So not only are we looking for housing solutions for those that are young and moving into our community, We're also looking at housing solutions for those that are empty nesters and don't want to downsize, and provide housing options for those that are 55 and older typically. Sure.
In the report, there is an age cohort chart in the report, and one of the fastest growing cohorts is over 55 to 65, and then 65 and over. About 15 to 16% of our population has crossed over into that. One thing also in that chart also shows the gender gap is increasing slightly. There are more females than male in our city now than there were 30, 40 years ago.
If I'm looking at your charts correctly, to me, what I perceive is Broken Arrow has been relatively affordable for most of the population as far as the housing goes. And according to what I saw based on salaries in our region, we're also doing fairly well too in comparison to some of the other cities as far as household incomes go. Is there an expectation for that to change going forward? Or is that something we're going to be able to continue to say, that our housing is relatively affordable to neighbors and our salaries are also relatively favorable according to those neighbors?
Well, I can't predict the future, but I would say the market has a lot of impact on that as well, as to whether or not how homes become affordable. I don't know if Farhad's got anything else he wants to add to.
Yeah, I think the cost of housing is going up, but it's a universal national trend that's happening all over. But when you compare us to some of the other regional cities, Broken Arrow is still very affordable.
Right.
And they are also, these other cities are also growing at the same rate where housing is. In the 20 census, housing building cost was $100 a square foot, when most of the other cities here were edging $120 a square foot. That figure has changed dramatically from 2019 to now, where the housing construction cost has gone up to $130, $140 a square foot, which is substantial price increase in the last 5 years or so.
City manager would like to say something.
Oh, I'm just going to say, good evening, everyone. To answer your question, Jonathan, it's a concern. To be honest with you, the aging population, we are growing though, so really we have to find the right balance. And I think that we're going to be discussing internally with the council, as well as our Economic Development Corporation, a strategy to make sure that we have some more senior housing. Number one, larger type projects that are dedicated to seniors, and secondly, is looking at different types of housing like condominiums and townhouses. Those are some opportunities, and we need to go try to recruit those developers to our community that want to be in Broken Arrow, because obviously this is a great place to develop. They're all the quality of life and so forth. But to answer your question, we can't predict the future, but we are concerned about it, and so we need to not sit back and just let it organically happen to where we're really behind the 8 ball, but to be more proactive in our attempts to try to bring in the type of housing that is more affordable.
Yeah, thank you. Options.
Well, what surprised me when I saw those numbers on that one slide, that I mentioned the household, comparing Wagner County to Tulsa County, how much more, I think it was 205,000 or something like that for Wagner County versus the 100, and I don't remember what the number was. I was surprised at how big a difference, but I guess when you look at Forest Ridge and those other big developments, it makes a big difference right there. Even though the values of the homes along Main Street and just on the outskirts of Main Street have gone really up high and also.
And that could also, as he said a while ago, amount to the land use, because that in Wagner County are a lot bigger lots.
Yes.
In fact, right now, they're big lots because they only have 2 houses on every acre.
Right.
So that goes into the price of these homes also.
That's right.
One of the things that we need to look at is, are there incentives the city can offer to try to reduce some of the costs that are associated with development, and we have the opportunity to do that with internal forces and other incentives we might be able to offer to entice the type of housing that the council believes that we need, which ultimately you would have to approve as a part of your roles as a planning commission. And so that's what we were excited about, continuing this task force. Maybe Rocky hadn't gotten to that yet, but looking at what recommendations we can come back, which the Planning Commission would vet, to see if there are opportunities for us to do things to incentivize some home builders to help them bring down the cost. Like for, and I'll turn it over to Rocky, is like for first year new teachers, public safety, so maybe even our other city employees, to make it to where it is affordable for them to be in Broken Arrow.
We just got to be careful because, of course, the Planning Commission, we don't have any control in that. And I'm not sure about the council, but, we don't want to sacrifice quality of the home for the overall price of the house for what we're getting.
Absolutely not.
And I know we don't have any say in that anyway on the Planning Commission, so.
But I was pleased when it set through this, you know what I mean, long time that was looking at this. It's hard to go back to remember everything, but living in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years, it's one of the things I missed here is all of the condominiums and townhouses that have been built. And I've always envisioned that in our downtown, area, a lot more down in that area, down on 101st there and Elm Place. So, and our different areas. So,
But I know, if I remember right in the study, we talked about apartments too, right? Which I think is about the national average, if I remember correctly. So that's a good thing. Right, that's not bad. So
to Mr. Spurson's point, after our last meeting with the school district, we did form another task force to continue on the discussions of incentivizing developments that are more affordable for our teachers, our public safety, city employees. So that's comprised of community development, economic development, the chamber, the school, getting their input. So one of the things we're looking at is working with our community partners.
Yeah.
I know Tulsa's got a couple programs out there for teachers specifically. I know Farhad's leading the charge on that to engage in discussions with them. I am taking on the task with working with our utility partners to see if there's some way to cut down on some of the utility costs for those teachers, policemen, firemen, whoever it may be. So we're going to continue these discussions to see if we can find those more affordable options to make it more affordable to live here in Broken Arrow. Because one of the things the study will show you is that where you buy your first home is typically where you stay. So we don't want our citizens or their children to go buy a house in Jinx and let Jinx thrive instead of Broken Arrow. So that is one of the options.
No, we do not.
especially Jinx.
Well, we're
Especially
getting
Jinx.
ready to have 4-year university, so that'll help.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that was one of the reasons I brought up the whole age demographic thing. 'Cause I remember when I first got on council 2 years ago, they were talking about, we're missing that younger demographic. They hit an earning potential ceiling and they moved their families out. And we're doing things like trying to bring the 4-year university. We're doing the
Rocky, it's not, because I know we're on a committee, I'm on a committee with the public, like you said, and it's
City
a
workers.
lot of other people too. That first-time home buyers that got to be able to afford something. And actually, there's a lot of empty nesters that move down too, so.
Yep. All right.
So if there are no more questions or comments, I'll turn over to the Planning Commission and make a recommendation to adopt a housing and demographic study.
Well, it's up to us to make a motion first, if we're going to approve it, to recommend it to the city council. So do y'all have any discussion? What's your pleasure on that?
With it.
I am too. I think it's a good
I think it gives us a good,
temperature of where we're at.
A lot of it's over my head, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah,
But
it's a lot of data to try
Right.
to confer, but, yeah.
As you get older, Robert, it'll come to you.
Later.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve for recommendation of this plan to the city council.
I'll second the motion.
Have most second, have roll call vote.
Payne,
Yes.
Townsend,
Yes.
Klimpa,
Yes.
Cone,
Yes.
Goranson.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, staff recommends you adopt a housing study and approve resolution
1635.
1635.
1695.
So moved?
I'll second that motion.
Roll call?
Pickle,
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Parks,
Yes.
Wimpy.
Yes. All right, item 5B is consideration, discussion, and possible action on updated zoning ordinance.
Good evening again, the group.
Yes, all of you.
So, it's too much. So this is a discussion on some of the zoning updates that we were proposing in the zoning ordinance update. As you're aware, this has been a long process in bringing this forward. I believe in November 2023 is when we were set to move forward with a preview ordinance. But in January 2024, we asked for a 90-day extension. Then in April of 2024, we asked for a 30 to 60-day extension. In June, we held a special meeting to go over the zoning ordinance update. And it was at that time we were directed by the governing body to work with the school districts to see if any of the zoning ordinance updates would affect the growth and the enrollment for the school district. So right now, I will turn over to Amanda, who will go over some of those recommendations in the zoning ordinance update, and then open it up for discussion.
Good evening, everybody. Amanda Yamaguchi, Planning Development Manager. I'll go through this pretty quick. I know we've talked to you all several times about the zoning ordinance. As you can see, we started this in November of 2020, so we are quite a ways into this. I know y'all are tired of hearing from me, but we'll kind of jump through these slides real quick, and then I'll be here to answer any questions. Rocky kind of already went through the timeline. Starting in November 2020, we put out the RFQ for qualifications. We ended up hiring Kindred Keast Collaborative. I won't go through all these and read them to you. We went through several stakeholder advisory committees, different installments of the ordinance, meeting with the committee, go back, make changes, revisions, meeting with stakeholders several times throughout these last few years. We had a lot of meetings. Okay. So, like Rocky said, the last actual meeting we had in front of you all was in June of 2024, where we were directed to go back, look at the housing study, make sure everything was aligning properly, working with the schools, and making sure we're all focused and going in the right direction together. So just quickly, you guys are all very familiar with the zoning ordinance, but basically this is our instructions for how we put together our city. So our comprehensive plan is our overall guide, our big picture. The zoning ordinance is really the instruction manual, the nuts and bolts of how it all goes together. So new versus old code. I know we've been over this a few times, so I'll try not to reiterate a whole lot, but essentially what we're doing with this new ordinance is looking specifically at housing. There's not a lot of changes in this ordinance for the commercial and industrial type uses. There were some tweaks here and there, updates, but the majority of the larger changes are focused on the housing. So we originally had, in our current zoning ordinance that's applicable today, we have 6 single-family zoning districts, or just, yeah. So we're consolidating those down to 3 different districts. The reason for that is to allow more flexibility for developers in developing these different types of housing. And looking at the housing study, it really reiterated to me that we do need to have options available. The days of just building single-family houses, we need to start branching out and looking at different options. Can we have duplexes? Can we have triplexes? Can we have row homes? Those types of things. So what we're looking at is a zoning ordinance that accommodates everything that we're used to and everything we're used to getting, the same standards, but also allowing a little more flexibility. That comes in the form of smaller lots a lot of times, but we've also tried to listen to the residents and neighborhood meetings that we have, and you all at Planning Commission and Council, in looking at those things that you all want to preserve quality of life issues. So we can kind of start going through these just a little bit. So the RS district is the new zoning district that takes the place of basically the R1, R2 districts that we have now. So we're looking at 60-foot lot frontages. That's pretty standard for what a traditional neighborhood in Broken Arrow would be. So this type of zoning would be your traditional neighborhood, everything that we're pretty much used to, very similar setbacks, very similar side yards. So this is what you're used to seeing. RSC, this is what's taking place of RS4 in our current zoning ordinance. So that reduces the lot frontage down to 50 feet, a little bit smaller lot sizes, those types of things. These are what you're seeing now in PUDs. The large majority of PUDs that come before you in the last probably 5, 6 years, meet this RSC standard. So we kind of looked at, the way we went about this is, what PUDs do we have and what do they ask for in the PUDs? So this RSC is really us trying to adjust to that as much as possible, but still keeping that single-family feel. RSP is where the fun stuff happens. So this is the preservation, single-family preservation. What this allows for is a much smaller lot size. So this is going to accommodate your like smaller home communities, your duplex type development, your row houses, things like here in the downtown area, for example. A lot in RSP would be very similar to the row houses you see over here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just on First Street, so that's roughly the size you're looking at. So yes, it's a tiny lot, but those are pretty decent sized houses.
Right.
But it does allow for a flexibility in design and types of housing that you would see. For example, in other places in downtown, something that that you'll see if you go out on Dallas, we have a few vertical duplexes. So they look like a single-family home from the curb, from the street, but you actually have 2 units stacked on top of each other, which is unique to Broken Arrow. So this zoning district would really allow for that. Now, one of the things that we felt was very important with this is when you have smaller lots, the immediate response is that's going to be very, very dense. So what we did was control the density by requiring more amenity and open space, buffer zones between existing neighborhoods and these new neighborhoods. So your actual density, like lot per acre, changes by 1 or 2 houses per acre. It's not a significant change in density, although it will look like it because those houses are going to be clustered together on smaller lots. But in exchange for that, you get a 50-foot buffer between Mr. Park's existing neighborhood. You get 50 feet between that and where your new neighbor's homes start. So what that does is give those people with the tiny house yards more open space to live, work, do their thing. And it also gives the existing neighbors a feeling of protection of their property and their space. So a lot of things we hear, there's going to be 3 houses that back up to what is now my backyard. I understand how that's an issue, but so how do we balance providing developers with opportunities while also protecting the neighbors? So that's kind of where the RSP comes from. There's a lot of restrictions in there and details that I won't bore you with tonight. If you guys get real bored, you can call me. We can talk through them all. So since the last time we met with you guys, we don't have any major changes. We do have some tweaks, some things that we've noticed over the last year. We have had a couple PUDs come through that you guys are familiar with. They are PUDs that meet this proposed code, but we had to do them under PUD, under the existing code. What that allowed us to do is kind of use those as test cases. So we noticed a couple things in the new zoning ordinance, things that from the old code to the new code that didn't transfer over, things like that. So like we had a minor amendment for one of those PUDs because we didn't realize that in the new code, we didn't carry over that one little sentence that allowed for reduced building setbacks on non-vehicular sides of corner lots. That's really important. It's one sentence. Yeah. So that's one of the things that as we worked through those, we've identified those kind of little things. They might be little as far as text is concerned, but for developers, they're a big deal. So we've gone through and as we've identified those, and it's probably been a little bit helpful actually to wait this long because it has given us a chance to identify those things. So we're doing that. There were some clarifying language issues that came up in some of the public meetings, which I'll go through a couple of those in a minute. And then we're also working on the zoning map updates, and there'll also be an update to the comprehensive plan that comes along with this, just because the comprehensive plan does specifically say RS1, so we need to change that language to RS, RSP. So no real content changes to the comprehensive plan, but we will have to update it as far as language, just to make sure that everything's working together there. A couple of those language issues that came up. So we had a community meeting, one of the PUDs that we talked about. This was one of the issues that came up. Item G, conserve the value of buildings and land. That's something that's extremely subjective to do. We can't work under assumptions of what things are gonna raise property values or lower property values. So what we did is tweaked that language. What? Do what? What are you talking? Oh, yeah, sorry. The recommendation was just to remove item G because that's not a thing we can really look at and control. Sorry. And then item D, preserve character and quality of residential neighborhoods. Again, that's very suggestive. That means a very different thing to me as a planner as it does a homeowner or someone who's an engineer or a teacher. Those can mean very different things. So we updated that language to read promote managed growth, taking into account residential businesses and opportunities for all residents. So we want to be very inclusive. We want to be cognizant of the surrounding neighborhoods, but we don't want to tie ourselves down into a way where we get into a battle with this group thinks this and this group thinks that.
So I remember the PUD that you're speaking of.
Yes.
And that was D was huge because that was the issue that they had was that the surrounding neighborhoods, it didn't match the neighborhood that it was going in between. And
Right.
so,
So for some people, matching means the lot size is the same, or the house size is the same, or the house price point is the same. Whereas that may not be the case. You know, matching could mean that just that they're both single-family residential. Like, there's a lot of different ways to interpret that. The other bigger item that came up is the same conversation with that PUD, was item B in this. There was an issue. From staff side, we know what this reads, but we can see how the public would read it. Basically, B is, the way it's written is basically saying that you can't deny a zoning change based on the comprehensive plan, which we know comprehensive plan is a guiding document. It's not enforceable. We take it very seriously, and 99% of the time we're going to follow that comprehensive plan. But what that statement was saying is basically just reiterating that the comprehensive plan is a guiding document, whereas the zoning ordinance is a regulating document. So we just changed that wording a little bit. This ordinance conforms to adopted planning policies, including the Broken Arrow Next Comprehensive Plan. However, the comprehensive plan is not a binding legal document. No provisions of the zoning ordinance shall be superseded by the adoption of any planning policy. Basically, it's saying the same thing, but in a much clearer way, in my opinion. So next steps that my team is looking at, assuming that we have your permission to move forward tonight, we would like to go ahead and publish for the public notice. That has to be published 20 days before we can go to public hearing. We did go to public hearing back in 2023, but we feel like since it's been such a long time, there's not a lot of content change to the zoning ordinance, but from the public's perspective, it's been about a year and a half. And it's just kind of been sitting here. Nobody, aside from probably my team, has really looked at it since then. So we would like to go to public hearing just for that transparency. So if we publish that next week, we could look at having a planning commission recommendation, hear that at the planning commission on April 10th, and then subsequent council meetings on the 15th for preview ordinance, and then adoption on May 6th. So that's kind of what we're looking at as far as timeline. And I think just, if you have any questions.
I know the building community's been looking at this for quite a while.
Yes.
Also, it's good to go back, for public input.
Yeah.
But, they're wanting to build in that area or build underneath this code. I had a couple of questions. One is, you answered it, I believe, on the comp plan. So all we're going to have to change is the legend for all of it. The colored, as far as the colored areas, we're not going to go in and redo the comp plan right now.
No.
It will stay that same.
Yes, the comp plan, the content will stay the same. There's one chart in there that says these specific zoning districts are permitted in these levels of the comprehensive plan, which corresponds to that colored map. So we just need to change the RS1 to RSC or RS and so forth. Just making sure those are aligned with the new zoning ordinance. But it wouldn't change anything as far as the map itself or any of the policies in the comp plan.
And that's good. I had one other question too. Go back to the one where you was talking about the row houses and whichever zoning that was. So when they go in and they come in and ask for that zoning, do you go by the plat as to far as you know that that's what they're going to build? You know, a PUD, they have to stay with what, you know, is decided there. So if you come in and approve it, so where do they make the difference of whether it's two-story row houses or it's just single-story row houses through there?
That's not something we can restrict. So the only thing we could restrict is how tall they can go.
Okay.
So I think we have a maximum of 35 feet. So if they came in for this zoning, they would basically come in like a zoning case that you
Okay.
would see now and say, this property is X number of acres. We're expecting, you know, based on the calculations, to get this number of units out of that. When we go through the plating, we're gonna make sure that they meet all the subdivision regulations and engineering design criteria, all of that. Once they file the plat, that's really up to the builder at that point, whether they're gonna go 1-story, 2-story, 3-story, or what exactly they're gonna wanna do.
Okay. That was just
Typically,
my-
we're pretty aware of it, but there's nothing that we can really tie it to
Okay.
them.
I didn't think there was. That's why I was
Yeah.
questioning that. That's what they're going to have to build there, because there's nothing to say that they have to build that there.
Right, so they could do single-family residential, just 2-story, single-family house, or they could do the stacked duplex.
Okay.
It adds flexibility. One of the things I like is that you could have those mixes within a neighborhood. So you could have a couple row houses that are single-family, then you could have a duplex beside you. Functionally, they're gonna look identical. We're gonna make sure they meet the parking requirements of having 2 units and all of that fun stuff. But it does give a little more flexibility to the developers and what they can build.
Okay.
I did have a constituent reach out to me. She's in a single-family home, and then there's, and Rocky, you may have talked to her, and then there's a new construction being built right next to her it's closer to the street, so when you come down, you really can't see her house. Does this address that type of thing, or?
Yeah, that's one of those little things that we've added to the new zoning code. So we do have a provision that says the jog between the fronts of the houses can't be more than 5 feet. So you can have a home sitting at 20 feet and your neighbor could go back to 25, or if it's corner lot, you go up to 15. So there is a little bit of variation in that, but we don't want one house sitting back 20 feet and another sitting back 10. Like, we want it to have a visual appeal there.
So you can control that if it's an older subdivision, you can control that they have to go back so far?
Yeah, so our setbacks are a minimum. If they wanted to set their house back, if they had a really deep lot and they wanted to set it back 50 feet, as long as they're meeting the minimum 25, they could set it back farther than they want, but they can't go any closer to the front of the street than that 25-foot setback.
What about the new units that are on Main Street, right off of 71st?
Main Street's a little different because it falls under the DROD, so we do have provisions in there for 0 lot line type developments.
Okay.
So I believe those are probably 10 foot from the property line, which is a maximum in the DRD. So
Yeah.
you could go right up to the street in the downtown area. Most people don't. That's more for like Main Street type development.
Sure.
But it is an option that's available. But like I said, this is downtown is a very specific location. What fits downtown isn't really gonna fit contextually with other stuff in Broken
Those
Arrow.
are sure gonna, affect the 2 houses on either side of them because they are so close to the street. I was kind of caught off guard by how close they were.
Yeah, and that happens with infill development a lot. You'll see that in Broken Arrow all over the place, in the downtown area, when we're infilling with brand-new $400,000 homes right next to 50-year-old, maybe $60,000 homes. You're gonna see a lot of differences.
Yep.
Amanda, I had a couple questions. So RS3, what category is that one falling into? I don't remember hearing you say that.
RS3,
Would it be the RSC?
I believe it's RSC.
Okay.
Yeah, RSC.
Okay, cool. And the other thing is I know at one point, because I was on that committee, we were looking at not just the 50-foot buffer, but the first row of houses matching lot sizes to what's on either side. Is
Yeah.
that still in this, or did we just
It is
decide
not.
to go? Okay.
We went with the 50-foot buffer. We had several conversations with the developers on our steering committee. They felt, putting a 50-foot buffer is pretty restrictive on them. We're getting rid of a lot of their buildable area. So we felt it was a decent give and take. Like, yes, you're gonna give them 50-foot buffer, but in respect to that, we can't require you to match the backyard like width of.
Right,
that,
I
but
wouldn't think both, so
Right.
we're just doing the 50-foot buffer and
We thought
calling
the
it good.
50-foot buffer would be more protection, plus it allows for more amenity space, more open green space, less density per acre, all those types of things that we wanted from the staff side.
Yep, thank you.
When that 50-foot buffer, we're only going to try to get that, request that when we do a PUD, correct?
That will be for all new developments coming in under that RSC.
Okay,
So anything, no PUD required.
okay.
But
Well,
one of the things we tried to do was take all the things that you all ask for in PUDs, and we tried to just incorporate that into the zoning code as a base. So
Okay.
that is now the baseline for development.
Well, I have a number of questions, but I think some of these I might save and talk to you later about, or actually when you bring it before the planning commission. But one of the things, like the NCOG maps, and I know you talk about zoning map changes, so I guess, do we change the NCOG map for them, or will they make the changes on that one, or?
So we actually have a consultant, so once this goes into effect, we'll be using Encode, which is a totally different, it's not even through NCOG, it's a third-party management company, basically. So our zoning map will look different as far as, like, the colors will be the same, it'll still be accessible online, but it won't be managed by NCOG. Right now, what happens is when we bring an ordinance to you all, you guys approve it, we then send it off to NCOG and have them update the map. So that process will be the same, we'll just send it to Encode instead of NCOG.
Okay.
And have them update
And
it.
so some of the applications that are underway now or getting ready to, I've seen it before that y'all have actually told them like, hey, this is what's coming. So they've designed that and then they've changed it the last minute because it hadn't been adopted yet. I guess that's how you're continuing to work with them. And that way when it comes in to the planning commission or the city council, after the new zoning ordinance is adopted, they'll be ready for that? Or will you let them go with the RS3 or whatever until, even after that one's
Yeah.
adopted, since it was ongoing, if
Yeah,
that makes
it's gonna
sense?
be kind of on a case-by-case basis. Anything that comes in brand new from the date of approval on will have to meet the new code. However, we do have things that are like right smack in the middle of the plating process
Right.
right now. We're not gonna change
Right.
right in the middle of their process, make them redo engineering. So there will be some that finish out with the existing zoning ordinance under the existing code, anything that was in process.
Right.
But anything moving forward, and that, like I said, that's gonna be a case-by-case basis.
But even if it's
Just
been
kind of-
approved, like next month as an RS3, it's going to be changed in RSC, right?
The map itself would change, yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And then I had, let's see, when will that be, when it was available for us to review, we were able to download it, well, look at it online, whatever. When will it be back online? When the availability to look at it again, or?
Yeah, so it's still available. I can send you the link to that. It's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
couldn't
buried in the
find
website. It's hard to find even for me. But there are some changes that staff have made on our side that aren't reflected on the public side yet. So I'll get with our consultant, see if they can run an update, and then I'll send a link out to all of you again. That way you have the cleanest copy available, because we've been kind of tweaking things as we see them, so.
Okay, and I'll save anything else that I got for later, so.
All right.
Because I know you're going to meet at
We
6:30.
sure do.
Yes.
I thought you were going to say you were going to save your questions and then keep asking questions.
Well, I do that.
Okay.
Well, I still have a question, sorry, guys. We talked about in some of our meetings, the possibility of adding some language. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place or somewhere else, to have to do with the facade. Are we gonna require, brick, stone, stucco, on certain percentages, or how high up, et cetera?
Yeah.
That we just, are we just throwing it out with the bathwater, or is that gonna go in somewhere else, or? is
That's
this
been
not-
something that we've looked at several times, looking through the state statutes, case law. And Trevor, feel free to chime in here, but we didn't feel like it's something that we can legally require on single-family residential. We can't,
No, other communities around us have.
they've done it through PUDs, making it a requirement of PUD, which is how we've done it historically, if it's been. But the problem with going through a PUD is it has to be the developer agreeing to that. It's not something
Right.
that we can require by code. So it's not something that's written in our code. The PUD is still an option. It's still out there, available. Of course, on the commercial, we have that ability to regulate those types of things, and we do, and it's in our new code as well. But for single-family residential, it's just not something that we feel like we have the legal ability to put in our code at this time.
But to what he is saying, like, for instance, there's a neighborhood right next to mine that is supposed to have 75% masonry. and I guarantee you, there are houses that have 0 on it, and then the most I've seen is maybe 5% masonry.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
But that's all under their HOA covenant, but they
Yes.
shared with all of us whenever it was getting approved and such, that that's what it would be, and now there's nothing I mean, so, and they're not the only neighborhood that's done it. I'm sure most of the neighborhoods are doing that aren't, if it's not written into our code, because they say it's in the HOA covenant, but they don't have any owners of the houses, so they are the HOA.
right,
So
yep.
you
That
can't
gets
enforce them to
into,
build their houses when they're already built, not to their code.
And that's what a PUD was good for, too.
Right. And
we
that's
can't
the only way
force
we
it
can
right into
require
a
at this
PUD.
point is through a PUD. What they
Right.
put in their private covenants is between them and their property owners and neighbors.
Right.
It's not something we have the
But there are no
legal-
property owners when they're building the
Right,
houses.
property owner is the developer at that point. But-
Well, I did have one more thing, since we're, the 50-foot buffer is not going to be required so much as the PUD, but just going to be like that. But, I mentioned this at the last planning commission meeting, I don't think you were there, Amanda, but I want to make sure that we got it figured out what we want in that 50-foot, instead of just a landscape buffer, how we treat that. I know we talked about trees, trails, things like that, but just an extension to make it look like an extension of a yard. They got 50 more feet in the backyard. That's not going to fly to me, because it's not going to look good, depending on what people put in their fences in the backyard. Does that make sense? It'll look like they got a lot going all the way up to the next addition with just a chain link fence or whatever they put, or in the middle of their yard. Does that make sense? We need to make sure it stands out the 50-foot, and I think if we could get some good control on that, that's what we ought to do. More
We can look into
trees,
that
things like
before
that.
Before we bring it back to you at planning
Yeah,
commission.
because we're trying to make it beneficial, make it a win-win
So
situation
we can
between
control what they
both
put in the buffer,
neighborhoods.
but we can't control what they put on the houses.
Correct.
That's why you're on the council. Figure that out.
Got it. All right.
You can also not approve.
So at this point, no action
If
is
it's
is
street zoning,
necessary.
it doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah, for street zoning, they can do it.
Yeah. So at this point, no action is necessary, just as long as you direct us to make these changes and we'll move forward.
But when it comes before the planning commission, after we were able to take a look at this big document, which is not as big as a comprehensive plan at least, we can make comments at that meeting, and depending on what discussions we have on that, we can forward to the city council for them to consider it too, right? So, I'm not saying it's all fair game, but there's some possibilities to make changes, right?
Yes, sir.
Not big changes, but, okay.
All right.
And we've looked at this for a long time also.
Just a couple days.
Just one quick, if I can, Mayor. Mr. Schwab put together a short email and some data, and that I would like, obviously, it's been given to the council. I'd like permission to give that to the planning commission, because it talks about how much actually the city's growing versus how much the school district has been growing over about a 35-plus year period.
Yep.
And I think that's important for the planning commission members, if they haven't seen that, to look at that. And then if you have any questions, you can get with Rocky to answer those questions, because obviously sometimes there's perceptions out there that the school district may be growing much more than the city, and that there may be explosive growth. Well, I can tell you, Kenny Schwab spent a lot of time putting this together, and I think it's worth just pointing out for you to look at. And then if you have any questions, get back to him, because we've offered to actually go to some of their redistricting meetings when they look for redistricting their schools, because obviously our growth is more than theirs is, and so this is a really good document. I want to make sure you point out that you had a chance to take a look at it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I would like to say I was glad to hear that we were going to have a joint meeting with planning commission and city council. If you ever want to do it again, I'm game, but I don't know about these, but I think it's a good thing to do, where we
You're
can
gonna
talk
limit
about
your-
things.
You're going to limit your questions, though.
Yeah, for periodically. for
Well,
certain things, yeah.
I don't know why I keep hearing that.
I
Yeah,
know. Okay. Are there any further comments of the council?
No, ma'am.
Mayor Wimpy, you've got that control on his mic right there.
I've got this one.
Oh, yeah.
That one works even better.
Yeah.
I actually appreciate the questions that you asked during planning commission and
She just
during
giving
this
me a rough
one.
time.
I'm just kidding.
I know,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to make sure.
I do occasionally kick them.
Guess we're ready for a motion.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to adjourn this planning commission.
Second.
Have most second adjourn. Roll call vote.
Payne,
Yes.
Townsend,
Yes.
Klimpa,
Yes.
Cone,
Yes.
Goranson.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Sure. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Pickle,
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Parks.
Yes.
Wimpy.
Yes.
All right.